If you're here, you are a user, a producer, an observer of data in some way or the other. When I started journalism, I thought that there wasn't enough data on India. But someone very cool has written a whole book about it. There is a lot of data, and we weren't asking the right questions. So we're going to start with those tough questions today. Who collects this data? Who gets left out? And how can we all be better? Here to ask and answer, founder and director of Data for India, a platform dedicated to expanding the access and understanding of data, and also Arpit's boss, Rukmini S.
Okay. It's great to be here. I'm excited for the conference. Hang on, let me unselect this. Okay. It's extremely exciting to be here at a community-run conference, community-driven one, a community that I am part of. And the community is the reason that I am here. I have no background in math, stats, design, tech, politics, economics, or anything particularly useful. And the reason I've been able to do what I do is because of community, and the reason that I'm speaking here is because of the warm embrace of this community. So I just want to start with that. A couple of quick caveats. Most of what I'll be talking about today has to do with public data. And I recognize that public data is not the only source of data, nor the only data that many of us here work with. But I will argue that some of the lessons that we should take from how we engage with public data apply to how we engage with data, and I would say apply to how we engage with the world more broadly. So while most of my examples here are from public data, I think some of these lessons apply more widely as well. I'm going to rush through things because I want to keep to time. So if there's something I talk about here that you'd like to know more about, or if the chat wasn't clear enough, please catch me all through the day. For people joining online, you'll have my email address at the end of the day. So a little bit about me. As I said, I didn't study anything useful, which is why I ended up in journalism. After having been field reporter for a number of years, which I loved, I moved to data journalism, not because I had studied numbers, but because I had encountered research around India for the first time, and I wanted to bring greater rigor to journalism. This seemed like one of the ways to do it, which is to use research in some of my reporting. I learned how to look at Indian numbers and Indian data sets on the job, and then sort of ended up focusing more heavily on data journalism. One of the things that gives me huge satisfaction is to see how far Indian data journalism has come in the last 10 years. So there's very rarely cause to say nice things about changes in Indian journalism over the last 10 years. But I think one of the things we can all feel pretty good about is the quality of data journalism across Indian newsrooms, and you'll hear more from one of its best proponents, Srinivas Ramani, later today. I went freelance around the pandemic and then wrote a book which tried to pull together my experiences both on the field and as a data journalist. In 2024, I, along with my co-founder, launched Data for India, which is a public platform that pulls together socio-economic data around India, aims to explain it to a lay audience through a combination of writing, charts, and we talk a lot about methodology, which is something I'm going to talk about today. So there's 4 or 5 key themes that I wanted to talk about, and I'll start with this one. So a lot of the time, there's a very justified hand-wringing about the lack of data that's available. And you know what? Let's all do that. I'll lead the hand-wringing. I'll join in it entirely about data that isn't available. We should all be very unhappy that the census has taken so long to come. But it also is a moment, standing here, to take some amount of stock of what an enormous improvement there has been in accessibility to most public data. I've seen this personally in the last 10 years, and part of this is a huge improvement in the technical aspects of access. I'll talk about that first. So it's pretty startling to think about, but most of our work and most of the work of all of academia in India around politics and economics comes from what is called unit level data, which means this is anonymized data, but you have information for every individual. And it allows you to do incredibly rich things, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's pretty startling to know that free access to to the unit level public data happened just 10 years ago. Until 10 years ago, this was highly restricted, and it also meant that there was gatekeeping around who could use it and who could talk about it. So to have come from where we were to this situation right now, where a lot of microdata is made available on government websites, is a huge improvement, and all of us working in this space benefit from it enormously. There's also become a multitude of ports of access. So there's a lot of improvement from the main statistics body of the Indian government. It's also become more interested itself in data visualization from the times that you would see, these lurid primary colored pie charts to a point where you can do maps and visualizations on the National Data Analytics Platform, which is the image in the middle. We've come a long way in some of these systems. What we've also come a long way is in community. So there is a thriving and exciting open data community in India, and one of its greatest examples was born originally out of Bangalore. It's called Data Meet. It is a Google group. It's essentially an email in your inbox that I've had for the last 10 years. And so many of them are versions of this, which is, I'm sorry if you can't see the details of the last one, but versions of, I'm looking for X, does anyone know where it is? And someone pulls it up either from a government website or from their own GitHub. It's an amazing resource and allowed a lot of us to do a lot of what we do. There are also a bunch of private initiatives now. There is India Data Hub, there is India Data Portal, there is CMIE, there is Data Full that comes from Factly, a number of these exciting initiatives that also aim to push access to data forward. Having the data means that there is a lot that you can do with it, and I'm going to argue that it's not just fun things that you can do with it, it also helps truly expanding how we think about and understand our country in some very fundamental ways. Now, I spoke a little about unit level data earlier, and the reason unit level data is so important to me and my team is because sometimes there are 5 or 6 preset ways in which the report or the person presenting the data is looking at that data. And you may not want to look at that. So for example, rates of literacy may be shown by age group, they may be shown by gender, they may be shown by geographic distribution. But you may think that the differences in access to education for marginalized communities and others is central to the understanding of India. Unit level data allows you to pull in those intersectionalities where they didn't exist before, so it's extremely important to many of us who work with public data. What this data also allows us is to tell sometimes sobering and sometimes moving stories about how the country has changed. I personally find this chart extremely moving. It's strange to find a set of dots moving, but at least I know I'm in good company here where many people find dots moving. This shows male and female literacy over time. And many of us may have grandparents who are in their 70s or parents. And so many of us have parents and grandparents in their 70s, and we know this. We know that the likelihood of grandfathers having gone to school was so much higher than grandmothers. We see that difference in literacy. And that difference in literacy has disappeared among younger people. So to know that at least that one driver of inequality has disappeared over our lifetimes or our grandparents' lifetimes is moving. And it's something that looking at this level of access of data now allows you to do. What we're also able to do now is to pull together multiple data sources which tell you stories that you may not have known otherwise, or that you would not have been able to say by looking at one data source alone. And let me just tell you something, just one fact from this. So this is my colleague Abhishek Waghmare's work, as was the previous slide, looking at education in India. And if you look at just that blue line, that is data on literacy from India's National Family Health Survey. Now the first half of that broken line was when the NFHS had its methodology, was to administer a literacy test to people whom they were not sure about the literacy. So what happens is that the question is asked to the household head, which is typically the oldest or most outspoken man of the family, who answers for everybody in the family. If there is reason to be unsure about the education levels of everyone, the NFHS administered a literacy test to them, and that's what the first broken line shows. What happened after that is they stopped administering the literacy test. They only asked the household head. And in the year that you see that both methods were used, where the break in the line happens, you can see a significant gap. So it's highly likely that literacy is being overstated by household heads, and we don't know for whom in particular. Are they overstating it for the women in the household? Are they overstating it among disabled members of the household? We don't know that. So we are able to do this because we look at multiple data sources. So this access to data has allowed us all to become, to some extent, fact checkers of these numbers. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm very excited to hear from Anand at the end of the day, who will also be speaking tomorrow. But just a little bit about tools. This has truly been one of the transformational things in my work as well. I'm going to give you a quick example. About 10 years ago, I was interested in something that people are interested in today too, and I see a lot of work happening in Bangalore about it that I'm excited about, which is about violence against women and understanding it through looking at the court system. So what I was interested then was looking at legal rulings around assault convictions. And I was trying to use Delhi's district court website at the time. After trying everything that I possibly could, there was a captcha that would keep failing, search text would keep failing. I opened up a Google Sheet as one of the tabs, and for 6 months I kept it open and kept manually filling it because I had to hand code 600 cases and read all the text in it. I'm so glad to be able to say that nobody needs to do this anymore. It's a poor use of anyone's time. It's not a humble brag at all. It's a terrible use of 6 months, part of 6 months. And there's exciting work that's happening using LLMs that allows you to say this vital stuff. So what I was able to say from this, for example, was that the majority of what was being listed as sexual assault was actually the criminalization of consenting relationships, often intercaste and intermarriage, by parents and family members helped along by a willing and able police force. This is something that better research than this has repeatedly shown, and you're able to do it so much better with the tools that are available right now. We can all retire this spreadsheet. But all of this sometimes gives us a God complex. I tell my team as well that I worry that being able to look at unit level data makes you feel super powerful. And what it does also is it makes you slightly pay less attention to where these numbers are coming from. Now, I don't blame people who are not able to figure out where the numbers are coming from, because the documentation is extremely difficult to access and super painful to read. So we need to make that part better. The locus of responsibility is not on people to figure out all of this stuff. The locus of responsibility is on us, the users and producers of this data. So if people don't know the answers to some of this stuff, it's on us that we haven't got that across to them. Some questions that I feel are important to ask when looking at public data in particular, but in all of your jobs as well. So this is work by Rosa Abraham of Azim Premji University here in Bangalore, and to just quickly say what it says, depending on the way you ask women the question about what work they did in the week preceding the survey, depending on the way the question is asked, you get substantially different responses. And it's an important thing to feed back into the system if we're trying to understand female labor force participation better, for example. It's also very important to understand who is being asked the question. Now, again, this is a piece of investigative work done by my colleague Abhishek Wagmare. So let's just look at this, which is a screenshot from a government report, which is about the share of people who could use email. So you look at any of those numbers, they're all roughly in the 50% and above range. Just to show you where that number comes from, you don't need to read all of this, Abhishek's done it, so we're good here. That the column circled with red is the one that has the one we're looking for. But to get there, these are the hoops you have to jump through. First of all, you ask people if they're able to use a telephone. Only if they are, then you ask them if they're able to use a smartphone. Only if they're able to use a smartphone or a desktop or a laptop, they're asked whether they've used it with the internet for any purpose. And only those people are then asked the email question. That's okay. That's okay if that's the system. But your denominator should then be all people, right? Of all the people asked, only so many could use email. The denominator in the numbers that you saw here is only the column just before the one circled in red. So he had to do all of this because that number just seemed a bit off to us to get to what is being asked. And sometimes these are intentional deceptions, and that's something to be very careful of as data journalists in particular. Sometimes they're unintentional, and then the job is a lot harder than for us. But my argument is this: you have to put in the work. You're going to have to put in the work to do all this, to get to the data that then allows you to do cool stuff. Okay, we all want to do cool stuff, but it's going to take work to get there. Also, just quickly about where numbers come from, the internal life of numbers. In 2022-23, there was an unexpected shift in India's workforce participation numbers. We don't need to get into that. My colleagues Pramit Bhattacharya and Nandlal Mishra looked into the data to try and figure out what was going on. And they isolated the change to Assam alone, to just Assam. Assam's population appeared to have tripled, look at that red one, from 30 million to 90 million in 1 year, and then gone back to 30 million the next year. So they looked closer at the numbers to see what was happening, and they figured out that through an error, one village had been assigned 650 times the weight that it should have been. And as a result, all the characteristics of that village got blown up to the whole country. That one village, a tiny rural village, in fact one which has high out-migration, so it had so many women and children in it that it just skewed all the numbers. That error skewed all India numbers around workforce participation, sex ratio, female labor force participation, all of that. It's not in the paperwork. This wasn't something that just needed us to plod through the paperwork. This needed to be figured out just with a sort of spidey sense of why have things suddenly changed in this 1 year. And then finally, just one point that I would like us to repeatedly think about, which is that things have become very polarized, and as a result, the way we look at numbers is pretty polarized as well. Now, we're all humans with our own politics and subjective biases, and we're not required to become robots without these. That's not what's required of us. But it does mean that when we look at the numbers, we need to think about why we're looking at it in a particular way. So these numbers are about anemia in India, and you may have come across some of the discourse around it, which is that the rates of anemia in India have gone up, and then anemia as a question was dropped from the health survey, and so that probably means it was because the numbers were going up. Now, we did some work and we found that there is an issue with the way anemia is being collected. So that chart on the right is from a study done in Tanzania that found that the collection of anemia numbers is highly sensitive to the method used. And the very basic method that India has been using until now is producing inconsistent and higher numbers. It's not just that. Global aggregates like the World Bank mix together surveys done using one method and the other without telling you which country has used which. So you may be tempted to compare, say, India and Sri Lanka and say India's anemia rates are so much higher, while the two countries use different methods. So all of this is some of the stuff we're going to have to think about before we're able to use data. This is what I want us all to think about, even those who don't use public data. I want us to think really hard about who it is who can understand what we're doing. Now, I'm going to sound like my own parents here who use cool as a bad word. Does that happen in your house? Cool is to do something, too much, reaching too far. We all want to do cooler stuff, right? And it's okay to only want to do stuff that other people like you can understand, or to do stuff that's cooler and cooler. All of that is okay. But we need to at least be humble about this one fact, that very few people are getting it. Or let me pull that back one step. We don't know how many people are getting it. All of the discussion that I'll go out on a limb and say that you're going to hear even over the next few days, a lot of our assertions about what people can understand and preferences around data visualization are not based in work that was done in India. We do not have a good sense of what data people can understand, what data concepts people can understand, and what visualizations people can understand. So when people instinctively tell me, use a bar chart, not a pie chart, nobody understands pie charts, I'm not willing to accept that until I see some good work done around what people actually can understand in India, or to take it further, whether people can understand data viz at all. This is a serious question that some of us have when we find that people gloss over data viz entirely and go to the text or even audio. They'd rather skip even the text and get to audio. And this is not surprising if you think about how math is taught in schools, where you're made to feel dumb if on day 2 you didn't understand what was happening. It's linked to intelligence, and women and people from marginalized communities in particular are made to feel like math is not for them. You're starting right from there. So I do want us to keep all of that in mind. We're starting from a place where not all Indians have access to phones, and women in particular and people from marginalized communities are less likely to have access to phones and less likely to use the internet. They're also more likely to be using shared devices, so their own personal sort of understanding of what they're getting to do is limited. We're also definitely talking about a country. So first of all, the share of people who own a laptop in rural India, 2% of households own either a laptop or a computer in India. Now, one way of thinking about it is everyone uses their phones, and that's fine. But a lot of the things that we're talking about need to be done on a laptop. For things like presentations or more advanced work than that, spreadsheets, they need to be done on some sort of computer or laptop. And so we see this, for example, all of us do work that's based out of spreadsheets. Let's at least just be humble about how many people out there know anything about how to use a spreadsheet. And all of this is in the context of the fact that many children leave school not able to do without basic functional literacy. So this is the test that Asar, another great product of Bangalore, has produced. And in 2022, they found, for example, that 30% of children in grade 8 could not read a grade 2 text in 2022. This is the sort of test that they administer. So we know that kids are leaving school often without functional literacy. We are not all talking to the same people, and we don't have to. There's no virtue signaling in being able to be understood by everyone in every language in every corner of the country. But let's at least come together to accept what ground we're standing on. Let's start from there. So I'm going to end by saying that data has been transformational in India. It's not just the understanding, so it's partly that the understanding of data has done a lot for how things changed in the country. Data was closely tied to the nationalistic product out of which the country was born. It was a nationalistic movement to set up a statistical machinery that was like ISRO. I often say I feel like there should be a Netflix show on the NSS, not just on ISRO. It was tied to a decolonizing moment. And so data has had a transformational impact on the country. People on the ground have put data to work to have a transformational impact. So if you read M.R. Sharan's work, for example, you see what using NREGA data, so from its administrative data to paint it on walls, has been able to do in terms of bringing about accountability. People have used the RTI to produce data that's brought about accountability. Data has transformed the country, but we need to put it to work to achieve some of these aims. Again, not everybody has to do this. We don't have to all do the same work. But it's going to take work. It's not automatically usable without putting any of this behind it. Let me end by thanking the VizChitra team. Please look at Data for India for your work. I also want to encourage you to look at our installation by my team on the first floor near the tea counter. Do I have 5 minutes for questions? Yes, great. Okay. I would love some questions. I saw someone there. So comparing field Yes, so I think this is used widely, and I think there's two ways to think about it. One is whether you can use. So the question was, do I know of people who use who look at both large-scale data as well as granular data on the ground together, right? No, so I don't do it. I've used it in my reporting in the past, but our team doesn't do it. We aim to tell broad stories about India and to the state level, but not more drilled down than that. However, people on the ground often do it. So if they're using either a small survey or this administrative data that comes out of a region, you compare it with large data sets. Just one line, there's two possible ways to do it. Either you look at the national data to give you a sense of what the broad, the ground realities is. Sometimes people also use it to call out differences. So I think this can be a pretty valuable way of cross-checking between data that's collected by, say, state administrations. We've given so many people vaccines versus what household data says, that we were only able to vaccinate 30% of children in that district. Where do you think work is, God, I'm thinking as I repeat it. Where do you think work is really required in India to have an impact on data? So I'll say my thinking has shifted in the last few years. A lot of the focus of my rage used to be on the producers of the data. And there's still rage to focus. There's lots of rage going around. We could focus some of that there. We should be angry about not having had a census in so long. There's lots of other data we need. We need quicker data. We need more granular data. But I think it's now shifted towards the analysis of that data. So I feel quite frustrated by some of the dimensions in which data has been looked at again and again, and I feel like it's led to a loss of nuance. I also have a huge issue with the polarized manner in which both news reporting and academia functions to the detriment of knowledge. That's happened in the case of anemia, it's happened in the case of labor force participation. It's a huge issue. I don't know if you realize how much of work that has been produced is faulty because it comes from a place of ideological polarization. Yes, please.
So I understand you worked in the case of PMLA, getting data around PMLA, how many people were convicted and all of that, right?
No, I haven't worked on PMLA. Sorry, yeah.
So my question is, how much influence can data around such a thing influence Supreme Court to take their judgments? Like so, we saw a lot of people being convicted or sent to jail just because of PMLA, and the conviction rate was very low. So did Supreme Court take into account those kinds of things as well, that the conviction rate was low and people are being jailed? So is there any influence with the data you presented?
So let me quickly answer that, and more broadly, which is about the impact of data on the judicial process. It happens in both ways, and it happens in extremely damaging ways as well. I would say the Indian judiciary is not at a place where we can feel much confidence in an accurate sort of use or a non-partisan use of the data. To my mind, the bigger problem actually is the impact that news reporting has on court decisions. So in the course of the work that I did around sexual assault in India, I got to talk to judges as well. And many of the judges were so poorly inclined to be on the side of women because of the news reporting that they had encountered. So that can have extremely damaging directions. I think people have used data in their work quite successfully. There has been work done around under trials, for example, that the Supreme Court has taken well. And I think the credit for that goes to advocacy organizations like NLU Delhi, NLS, etc., NALSAR, not advocacy legal research, who've done impeccable legal research using data that then is used by the to secure human rights victories in courts.